What's going on, everybody? It is Peter Kowalchuk, writer, director, and founder of Fanaron Films. And I'm very happy that you're all joining me today because today I'm starting a new series. I am writing a feature film, but not just any old feature film. I've written dozens of high concept, high budget features that I knew were never going to get made or I was trying to sell or spec to studios. But something happened recently to me that has made me realize that nobody's going to come knocking on my door to buy my script. So I'm going to be writing a micro budget film that I'm planning on filming for the next year. And it's starting today with the outline. So today I'm going to be outlining this micro budget feature. I have a couple of ideas and I'm going to really dive into one of them. And I'm really glad that you're here to join me for this journey because over the next year I'm going to be documenting the writing and the pre-production of this feature, and then I'm going to be documenting the making of, and then hopefully by the end of the year you'll all be bought in enough to go and see the film. That's any filmmaker's goal, is to build an audience, create something unique and original, and then have your fans go and enjoy the art that you created. So welcome on this journey and welcome into the Fanaron. So we're going to start out with a little bit of backstory. I'm going to pitch this idea to you. First of all, I recently did the 48-hour film festival, and for those of you who haven't seen the film, it's up on the YouTube channel and it's on fanaronfilms.com. So go ahead and take a look if you're interested in seeing this unique Western that we drummed up out of basically just a writing prompt. It was so much fun, and it really just made me realize that short films are great for sharpening your blade. It's great for getting the reps in, but the thing that's really going to propel a career of an independent filmmaker is to make that feature. And like I said, I've been writing for over 10 years. I have over a dozen feature films written, but none of them are at a scale that I could actually go out and film. So here's my pitch for this micro budget feature called Tip of the Spear. It is about a young Marine who is a stellar Marine. He surpasses all the physical fitness tests and mental fitness tests. He's an expert shooter. He tried out for Scout Sniper school. He basically is top tier in the military, and he hasn't seen any type of combat yet. And he's a good man, and he thinks that he's training to defend this country and to do what's best for America. And in the beginning of this film, I'm thinking that he's recruited by some type of private military. And immediately after that, he's kidnapped, held hostage by a terrorist sleeper cell, and he's tortured for information. And so the premise of this is I'm challenging myself to write something that essentially uses two main characters, maybe a couple of supporting characters in the very beginning and very end, but the bulk of the film is going to take place in one room with two characters. And this is going to keep costs down for both locations, for props and like environment, and for acting. And I could probably get away with just a bare bones skeleton crew of maybe 2 or 3 people on set plus the actors for the majority of this film. It's going to take a little bit of logistics and planning for the first half, or the first scene, or the first act, and then possibly that final scene with a couple of extras. I'm thinking of possibly bringing in some of my old friends from the Marine Corps or some active duty Marines or soldiers who can really bring some authenticity to the role. But for my main two actors, I'm going to be using real actors. I'm going to be using my good friend Daniel Tomzak as my cinematographer, and we're going to be building out a essentially kind of like dungeon set where we can set up shop for 2 weeks and just film this intense torture interrogation scene. So for the past week, I've been just brainstorming and thinking of ideas and thinking of how I can come up with a story that's actually filmable. And I have been just taking notes. So I have my little notebook here. And if you are an aspiring filmmaker Wait, is this the right notebook? Oh my gosh. If you're an aspiring filmmaker and you have ideas, instead of letting those ideas come into your brain and then just escape, like you should write it down. And obviously, I have more than one notebook, so I'm have to locate the notebook that that I actually have my notes in. But that's the good thing about if you have a phone, if you have a notebook, if you have some ideas. Aha, I found it. If you have ideas, write them down. Don't let them escape into the ether, because one day, even if it's a year or 2 or 3 years later, you might come back to that, and that might spark that idea that you wrote down might spark some type of you know motivation to go and write or create this art that maybe you want to create. And so that's what I've been doing over the past couple of days, is just thinking of some beats of the story, seeing how I can flesh it out. And today is going to be the day that we dive in together and do a little bit of an outline. And my goal is to get this outline done within the next week or two, so that way I can dive in and really start fleshing out the screenplay. And once again, I'm going to be live streaming pretty much all of this, other than just like my late night brainstorming where I'm writing down in my notebook. But anytime I actually am going to sit down and write, whether it's the outline, the script, some storyboards, some shot lists, I'm going to be live streaming that. So all of you can come along the journey and see that creative process on how films are created. So without further ado, let's get into my outline. So first off, I'm going to kind of explain my process when I'm coming up with something new. So first I do the outline of the entire film. I have my act 1, my act 2, and my act 3 up here. And by the way, all of this outline template, this is available on fanaronfilms.com for all of you to download. It's I just created it in a Google Sheet, and it is everything that I've been studying for the past 10 years when it comes to story structure and screenwriting, that I've kind of melded together into my own process. And it's a really good starting point because it kind of gets me into the mindset of like what the world is, what the characters' motivations are. And it helps me when I'm in the writing process to come back and refer to this because I kind of know what the next beat is. But then again, it's also really fun to write out your beats, write out your pacing and stuff on this outline beat sheet. And then when you're in the thick of it and you got the flow state and you've got all of the ideas coming to you, kind of like give yourself a little bit of grace and flexibility when you're writing, and you don't have to stick to one thing if it doesn't serve the story. So, but this once again is a great foundation. It's a good way to start. So first of all, we're going to start in our ordinary worlds. So for our ordinary worlds, I think I'm going to start out with a Marine. So a Marine. Oh, actually, let me loop this around so that it's so that everybody can see. Uh-oh. So a Marine's training to be the best infantry fighter in his platoon. He's not seen combat yet, but he's on track to be one of the top tier fighters in the Marine Corps. So I'm thinking somebody younger in their maybe mid to late 20s, somebody who is very physically fit, very mentally disciplined. And let's also add in there that he's a good man trying to do what's best, what he thinks is best. for his country. And I think that that is a good moral starting ground for him, because obviously during this torture scene, he's going to be tested a lot. Okay. The inciting incident, the thing that starts him on the journey. So to go over this outline a little bit before I get too deep into it, we start with our main character in the ordinary world. The inciting incident happens, and he has to choose to participate in the inciting incident. So it's the thing that happens to him, but then he chooses to participate, and that starts his journey. Then he has a general goal within this journey, and right at the end of Act One, the stunning surprise comes in. It's something that makes the audience just their eyes open, their mouth opens, like they're surprised. It's something that's unexpected that really solidifies that journey that they're choosing to go on. So, for example, one of my favorite films, Jurassic Park, the inciting incident is uh, Grant and Sattler agreeing to go to the island and getting on the helicopter and going to the island. The stunning surprise happens shortly after that. It is when they see the dinosaurs for the first time, and literally they take their glasses off and their mouths open. They're like, oh my gosh, like it's a surprise. It's a surprise for them. It's a surprise for us. And that's what the stunning surprise really is. It's slightly different than the inciting incident. It happens because they choose to go on this journey. So for our main character, the inciting incident is going to be he's chosen to be a part of an elite private military program by his commanding officer, his CO. He accepts. He accepts the, what is it called? Not a recommendation, but the I'll just say he accepts because I can't think. He accepts and begins mentally preparing. His general goal is going to be, like, obviously he's extremely excited in the very beginning of this journey because he's an infantry marine. He's an infantry marine, and so his entire goal is to be the best at his job that he possibly can be. So his goal when he gets chosen is to perform at his best and become the elite fighter he knows that he can be and serve his country. The stunning surprise then is him being kidnapped, I believe. And once I get into the beats, once again, this kind of might change a little bit, but this is just my initial thought. So the stunning surprise is he is kidnapped. I guess adult napped, kidnapped. I don't know. He's kidnapped. He's kidnapped and taken to an undisclosed location, tied up by a terrorist. This is going to take place in the modern time, so I believe that I'm going to use somebody Middle Eastern, somebody maybe who has Muslim descent or understands that world, because I want it to be very authentic and kind of true to the time as of right now. So been thinking about kind of like a twist in the middle too, uh, to really challenge the character. But let me just keep moving. Okay, so once he is kidnapped, his new goal, it's very specific, is to not give away any secure information, and also to survive the torture. So he's not in an ordinary world, he's in a special world. His special world is he's in a warehouse somewhere undisclosed. His captor is torturing him. I imagine he's probably being tortured in many different ways. And in the beginning, maybe he's not even being questioned. He's just being tortured. Um, then his captor begins questioning him. He tries to stay true to his training and not give any information away. So that's, a very specific special world, and that's where most of the story is going to take place. So this is what I'm thinking for the midpoint, because I I'm a former Marine. I know that this kind of training is really necessary in order to prepare somebody for war. Boot camp is brutal because it's preparing you for war. Combat training is brutal because it's preparing you for war. Then, if you're chosen for some type of special operations like sniper or like going behind enemy lines or paratrooping or Navy SEALs, then it's even more brutal. Like it's like the 1% of the 1% can even get into that, let alone pass it and become one of those people. And it's all, once again, to prepare you for the most brutal thing in the entire world, which is war. Being captured by enemies and being held as prisoner or being tortured for information, like that happens in war. And so part of training, especially when you're going into spec ops, is going through some type of training like that to mimic being captured, being tortured. Now, I don't know if it's ever going to be as intense as actually being there, but they try to mimic it as much as possible. So this is what I've been thinking about when it comes to the twist in this story. At the midpoint, that point of no return, we have the character reveal or figure out that his captor is not a terrorist from a different country. He's actually a part of this private military organization that he was just selected to become a part of. So this entire film, then, the entire torture captive situation is not just him being held captive, it's actually training unknown to him. And this, I don't think that it happens like this. In real life, they tell you when you're going to the training. You go there, you're kind of prepared for it, but then you have to go through the pain of being tortured. But because this is a fictional private military like organization, I'm thinking that we just make it really intense, and he doesn't know that this is all part of his training. He thinks that it's real until the midpoint when it's revealed in some way. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. it is revealed that his captor is actually a trainer in this private military. And the entire kidnapping is staged as an initiation. Okay, so the character's want is to not give any information away and to survive the torture. But once this is revealed, he has to kind of change that. He's not trying to survive. He's just trying to pass the test. He's trying to come to terms with his moral like values and everything. That's, this is part of going to war. So come to terms that war is brutal and that this is a part of being an elite fighter. And his need is to also to pass the tests and become part of this organization. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, maybe that's not his need. His need is to realize that his moral compass does not necessarily align with this private military. Because that's one of the things that I'm really thinking about for his character is to have him be a really good person who's in an organization whose business is death and murder. War is crazy. War, things happen in war, and you have to fight and defend yourself and defend your country. But private military is more brutal than being in the military because it is like you have to be that top tier fighting force. You have to kind of like let some of humanity leave yourself because they go around certain like rules of engagement and stuff that the military cannot participate in. But private military, if it's a private company, they technically can do whatever they want. So they get the most crazy people, the best of the best, the most badass, and they allow them to do what they're best at without having to say, do I have clearance to fly? Or like, it's all the things that you would assume that the military is doing, but the military has so many rules that sometimes you can't really do what you have to do. So they have to bring in the private military to help you out. So that's going to be his need. His want is to become part of this organization. His need is to realize that maybe the organization is not aligned with his values. And I think the stunning surprise 2 is going to be that thing that really brings everything together, makes that the character realize that he's changing from his want to his need, like mentally. It's going to be right around that point in the story where it's the character's lowest point, like he feels defeated. And so I have a note here that a friend of his dies or someone he knows dies. Lowest point I wrote, when his friend dies, question mark. So maybe the captor kills somebody in the room with him. Which, I mean, if you're thinking about if someone's being held captive by an actual terrorist, somebody who's in like some type of terrorist cell organization, they're not going to care about a civilian. They're not going to care about a person who is who's in the military or any of their friends, they're going to do whatever it takes to get the information because they don't really have these rules of engagement. But if you're actually part of the military or part of a government organization, then you obviously can't do that. So I think where the disconnect comes, where that moral difference comes into play, is that this person who's torturing him doesn't care. So maybe he kills somebody. Stunning surprise 2 is the captor kills an innocent person or bystander and feels no remorse. Because if you're American and you are killing innocent people and you don't feel any remorse, like, yeah, great, you're in the military or you're in a private military. So at least you're trying to like focus it in the right direction, not just going out and killing people like a serial killer. But still, to me, that's like really messed up. Especially if the character finds out that this person is not actually a terrorist, and then the person kills another American citizen, that's even going to be more of a moral like blow to this character, to this Marine. So then we get into Act 3, which is that climax. We're going to have the major conflict with the adversary, which I'm thinking that our main character escapes. Marine escapes his bindings and attacks his captor, trying to escape. Success or failure. I love it when the main characters fail. Because we all fail in life. It reflects real life well when the main character fails, because even when you succeed, like you also had to fail and lose in order to learn the lessons that you want to learn. So let's see. The Marine escapes his bindings and attacks his captor, trying to escape. He doesn't want to kill his captor. Actually, no, he's going to succeed in what he has to do, but it's going to change him. So basically, the captor tries to actually kill the Marine, and he is given no choice but to defend himself. So maybe he tries to escape and not hurt the other guy, but then he has to, because he has to defend himself. So then we return to the ordinary world. So when the Marine finally escapes, and this is, okay, cool idea. He escapes. He's not in some type of warehouse somewhere. It's actually the training facility, because we find out that he's being held captive by this military organization. So when he leaves his captive area, he leaves his captor behind, who once again is American, and he leaves the victim, his friend, somebody bystander, the innocent person who was killed, leaves them behind and kind of just escapes, almost like at the end of Saw, where it's like, okay, let's just get my stuff and leave. Which, by the way, Saw is a great film that takes place basically in one room, with just a few characters. When this main character escapes, I'm imagining he leaves the place where he was being held captive, and he goes out and he emerges into some type of briefing room where there's other Marines and soldiers basically waiting for him and watching while he's being tortured. And when he goes out there, first of all, he just survived this test and passed this test because he didn't give away any information and he was able to escape. But he also killed one of their colleagues, and they also watched an innocent person die. So morally, this is going to get really sticky. But when he emerges, I imagine just a standing ovation. Like they just are like, "You're such a badass! You did it!" And like to me, like if I was sitting back watching something like that, I would be very like, you know, fighting with my own opinion. So this character, maybe he comes out, he's a changed man. He just had to experience this for possibly days on end. And he had to kill somebody, his first kill to escape. And it's an American. And so maybe he doesn't want to do this anymore, but he comes out and he's the most badass of all of them. And they praise him and they accept him into their club and they accept him into this private military organization. And he just glazes over and he just stares because internally, morally, he does not want to do this anymore, but he was selected and he is the best of the best. But maybe he doesn't align morally with the people who he is actually joining. So, okay, let me write that down then. He finally escapes. He emerges into a briefing room where he is given standing ovation. But he doesn't want to be a part of this anymore. All right, I'm just going to go over this one more time from start to finish, and then I'm going to scroll down and go over kind of like the next section of this, which are my story beats, which is really going to be all the nitty gritty. So in Act 1, we start out with the Marine in training to be the best infantry fighter in his platoon. He has not seen combat, but he's on track to be one of the top tier fighters, and he's a good man trying to do what he thinks is best for the country. Then the inciting incident is he's chosen to be a part of an elite military program by his CEO, accepts and begins mentally preparing. His goal is to perform his best, become the elite fighter he knows that he can, and serve his country. And the stunning surprise, the thing that really kicks off this story, is that he's kidnapped and he's taken to an undisclosed location, tied up by a terrorist. So then we get into the real story, that Act 2, where he has this specific goal, which is to survive and to not give any information away. His new world, the special world that he's in, is that he's being held captive in a warehouse somewhere undisclosed. His captor is torturing him. His captor begins questioning him and tries to stay true to his training and not give any information away. But then that midpoint, that's the point of no return. I got some notes over here. Point of no return. It raises the stakes. It makes things just more intense. Which, how can you get more intense than being tortured by a terrorist? Is the fact that it's revealed that his captor's not a terrorist, but he's actually an American, and this whole situation is staged, and it's his initiation. It's his boot camp into this private military. So after figuring that out, he figures out his need, not his want, but his need. He needs to come to terms with the fact that war is brutal, and that this is part of being an elite fighter. He has to realize that his moral compass does not necessarily align with this private military, which is, I think a lot of people realize that once they get into SEAL training and stuff like that, that they don't want to do this. And then the stunning surprise number 2, which is the thing that is the reversal, and it brings the character to their darkest hour, is the captor kills an innocent person or bystander and feels no remorse. And that's after we find out that this person's an American, which is brutal. And then our final act, which is our climax, the Marine finally escapes in his bindings and attacks his captor, trying to escape. He doesn't want to kill his captor, but he has no choice. The captor tries to actually kill him, and he's given no choice but to defend himself. And then he has to then return to the ordinary worlds, the world that he already came from, but he's changed. And that's when he emerges into a briefing room and given a standing ovation, but he doesn't want to be part of this anymore. So he's changed. And this, you know what? It's funny because this kind of mirrors my experience in the Marine Corps. At first, I was really gung ho, really motivated. I wanted to do 20 years. And then after being in, and I wasn't even infantry, I was avionics. So I was working in a room, working on components that go on the helicopters. But just being in there for 4 years, I realized that, like, although it's important that there are people in the military to defend our freedoms, like the organization itself and the morals and the culture and all that did not align with my morals and values. Still a very patriotic person, but I definitely did not fit in with the culture of the military or the Marine Corps. So, which is why I'm not in there anymore. And I wouldn't have been able to grow this glorious beard either. So it kind of mirrors, my story of being super gung ho and motivated, and then not being actually tortured, but basically just suffering the suck and being in the military and having to be basically a child babysat by a bunch of sergeants all the time. And then me escaping is just not re-enlisting. They say write what you know, right? Okay. Next part of this is going to be writing the story beats. And there's something that a lot of writers talk about, and I'm just going to go over it real fast. When stories happen and they just happen and things just are happening and people are just reacting, it's not as interesting or as good of a story as the characters making choices. I think that's the most important thing when it comes to telling a character driven story, is the character has to be the one choosing to go into this. Something happens and then the character makes a choice, and then that choice leads to something else happening, and then the character makes a choice, and it's just this kind of like snowball effect, this cycle, um rather than just things happening to the character. Things are happening to the character. Those, to me, those are kind of boring stories. So I really want to stay true to that by using these therefores and buts. Therefore but. So, like, for example, I'm trying to think of a movie that I can use as an example. I mean, every good movie uses this. Obviously, I'm blanking right now because I'm in kind of like my flow state and I'm thinking of my story. So I'm, instead of trying to give an example, I'm just going to go right into writing my story, because I've got some notes down here, just a page or two right now of my buts and therefores that, once again, I was just brainstorming. It's super rough. But I'm imagining it opening with some type of training or either tactical training with another crew or just our Marine going through an obstacle course. I don't know. I think that the tactical training might be more interesting, but I'm still trying to think of like micro budget. Hmm. All right. By the way, if you're watching this with me and you're enjoying the creative process and you want to see more, go ahead and check out our page and you can subscribe to the channel, because, once again, I'm going to be coming on here very frequently to flesh this story out and to write it. But we also have the podcast that actually shows me writing with other people, and we are creating these cool short stories and world building and stuff like that, and just, once again, sharpening our axe, sharpening our blade, and just getting those reps in, which is going to lead to better storytelling when it comes to the feature. So like and subscribe if you're having a good time. So let's just start off with a obstacle course. Also, you know what? I need to come up with a name for these people, so I'm not just calling him the Marine. Okay, I'll use. Okay, my last name's Kowalchuk. When I was in the Marine Corps, everybody called me Chuck. I'm gonna call him Chuck. 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 is training on an obstacle course in camis. He's a Marine. Ooh, maybe it's like a montage and he's shooting too. He's training on an obstacle course. He's shooting his rifle. He is maybe we show a montage of all the things that like really is required to be a stellar Marine. He takes care of his gear. Maybe he's cleaning his rifle and he's stoic because, especially when you're alone, Marines are not happy people. The new information is going to be. Nope, I'm in Act 1 still. He's chosen to be part of an elite military program. We're going scene by scene here, so I'm not going big picture. I think that I should probably have some type of save the cat moment in here in this first set. Oh, actually, before I keep getting into the nitty gritty, I'm gonna go in and put in my stunning surprises in all my major parts. So stunning surprise 1 is he is kidnapped. Chuck is taken maybe into a van with a sack over his head. So he's kidnapped. The midpoint, it is revealed that, ooh, okay, the captor is going to be Middle Eastern and Muslim. Maybe I'll look up some Middle Eastern names just to be authentic. All right. I've got a couple here. So Amir means prince or commander, which I think is kind of cool because this character is kind of like a commander, or he's the one leading. He's like a drill instructor. It's essentially he's the one leading the training. You got to be brutal in order to do that. You got to be like a really strong person, a commander essentially. It's also Malik means king. Ibrahim means father of multitudes. Omar, flourishing and long lived. That would be ironic if his name was flourishing and long lived and then he doesn't live very long. Okay, I'm gonna go with my initial instinct, and these also are all names that can be changed at any point. So I'm gonna go with Amir. Is it revealed that Amir is actually an American soldier? Excuse me. Okay. The stunning surprise number 2 is that Amir kills an innocent person. So maybe there's going to be like some time in here where our main character Chuck and our secondary character, the innocent person, is maybe there's a point where they're suffering together and they're kind of just like trying to support each other. You know, one of the films that I think about when I'm coming up with this story is Hacksaw Ridge, because once again I kind of like want to start with this theme of our main character being a good person, and even though he's like in the military and he knows that he has to do brutal things in the military, he still wants to hold on to that like morality that he has, and he justifies it at first, but this experience like really solidifies the fact that he doesn't want to be a killer or a murderer or a soldier or a marine or anything like that. So there definitely is going to be some type of kind of coming to clarification or coming to realization within here, maybe through conversation with this other guy who's being held captive as well. Let's see, what else do we have in here? The ends. Yeah, I really keep picturing him just like glazed over while there's just a bunch of soldiers just clapping and just like showing him praise. And he's like, I don't want your praise. Because at this point, it doesn't matter to him anymore. He doesn't want anything to do with this anymore. So at the end, Chuck Chuck's eyes glaze over, and he stares off into the distance as he is being praised. Standing ovation. Cool. All right. I think I have my main points here. So now I'm going to go into those little beats, those beat points. And so I've split this up because once again, like I said in the beginning of this, just over years of research and all the different methods, I've just taken kind of like what I feel is the best parts of every method and brought it into this Faneron method. And this is just what I use. So once again, this is going to be available for anybody who wants to use it for their own stories. But one of the things that I have heard many times is that there are 6 hero goal sequences within each quarter of your story. So the first act should be 6 hero goal sequences or 6 beats from the beginning to the stunning surprise, and that's when Act 2 starts. And then Act 2 should have 12, so 6 in the first half and 6 in the second half, right here after the midpoint. And then the final one should be 3 hero goals. And a hero goal in this context is a therefore and a but, therefore and a but, therefore and a but. So that's 3. 12 beats, 3 hero sequence goals, or sorry, 6 beats, 3 hero sequence goals. In the beginning, it'll be 12 beats, 6 hero sequence goals. So I'm going to try my best to stick to that, but I'm not going to hold myself to that rule. Sometimes you got to break the rules in order to tell a good story, and this could get a little bit cerebral and psychological because I tend to do that. All right, let's get into it. Takes care of hid gear. Takes care of his gear. So at some point in here, I'm going to do a save the cat moment. I don't know if I want to have him like defending somebody or maybe somebody is being kind of a dick to him and he reciprocates with kindness. Hmm. Or should I, instead of having a save the cat moment, have a moment where he, like we show where he is morally at this point, like he's kind of a dick, and then he becomes more of a person who is forgiving and kind. I think I'm gonna go with just initially just to save the cat moment. So he won't be completely a dick, but he's still, his morals aren't completely aligned with where he's headed. So the change won't be like he's an asshole and then he's a really good person at the end. It's like he starts as a good person, but he's making bad choices and he has to learn that his morals were not aligned with his choices. I think that makes it for a good story. Ooh, Knuckles. Ugh. He's tormented by another Marine while training. This bully basically has words with Chuck, insulting, belittling, etc. His reaction is, ooh, okay. Maybe his initial instinct is to become defensive and kind of fight this guy, but he, ooh, and then there's a but he's called away. Stepping up and ready to fight this guy. Okay, so it's going to be a guy. Let's name him. This other Marine, we're going to name him something random. I'm trying to think of the people who I served with, but I don't want to use anybody's real name. Blah, 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 blah. Goodman, because he's not a good man. That's ironic. I'm gonna name him Matt. I love Matt. Matt's my dad's name, but they're just placeholders for now. I'm gonna get into the beats and not worry so much about the characters' names. Hmm. Now I'm writing in some thoughts here, like of the character, but when I translate this over to a screenplay, like you got to write what you see on camera. You can't write internal thoughts, and you can't really write. I'm trying not to write like emotion into it at all, like even what's on their face, because I want to let my actors kind of like decipher how they would react in that situation so that the acting is very natural. So I don't want to just like obviously there are going to be some areas where the character's angry or like scared, but I'm just thinking ahead. I want to kind of like reduce the amount of those descriptors that I use, because then that'll let the actors have a little bit more freedom. Hmm. So his CEO calls him to his office sternly. Therefore, Chuck leaves the situation, entering the CEO's office. He thinks that he's going to get in trouble, but the CEO is joined by a recruiter for a private sector platoon. Joined by a recruiter for a private sector platoon. It's just private military. Because if you're active duty, they're not going to let you go to become a civilian, but they might attach you to um, a private sector platoon or like contract you out, FAP you out. Like there are moving pieces in the military. Just because you're part of one platoon or battalion doesn't mean you have to stay there. You can be attached to other platoons, other battalions. So trying to think of the logistics of how it would work. He's told that he's been selected for recruitment. Therefore, Chuck accepts So there has to be a little bit more of an interaction. Two more hero sequences here, which once again, it could be. This really wasn't a save the cat moment. Because he stepped up and he became defensive. So rather than like accepting, so maybe at this point he interacts with that guy again and then he kind of like apologizes. That could be like the save the cat right before he's taken. And that actually could prompt the fact that like why this guy was taken as well, because if they're together when Chuck is taken, then the person who takes Chuck might be like, "Oh, this is his friend. Let me use it to intimidate him." Chuck accepts the selection, accepts his selection, and leaves the office. The recruiter tells him his training will commence immediately. He says that the training will commence immediately. He says that he will he will be contacted by the instructor when ready. And Chuck leaves the office. Oops. Ah. Oh, I love Command Z. Okay, so but when he gets... Oh, okay, hold on. Now I'm thinking of logistics. Oh, my camera died. Oh my goodness. Hold, please. Well, I guess my camera overheats. I'm actually going to go put a fan up to my camera. Hopefully that doesn't mess up the audio too much, but I can't have my camera dying in the middle of a live stream. Come on now. Here we go. Got a little bit of a breeze going now, and I'm back. Hello. Welcome into the Fanaron. For those of you just joining us, we are writing a feature film, a micro-budget feature film that I'm going to be filming in the next year. Let's go back to my outline. What was I just thinking? Okay. I'm thinking that the guy who he interacts with earlier tries to fight him now, like blindsides him. And I guess instinctually and initially, I'm thinking that maybe Chuck leaves, goes to like the gas station or something to fill up his car or his motorcycle. And that's when he's kind of like blindsided by this guy. I'm going to write that in. Although that location, so like once again, this is the first act. This is going to be the most complicated part because it's going to require three secondary actors and 3 locations. But that first act is going to be like a short film, right? And then the final scene, that last scene, he's going to walk into the briefing room and there's going to be a bunch of guys and possibly some girls just standing ovation, clapping for this guy because he's a stellar, like badass killer, basically. And so that will also be complicated. I'm trying to think of like the days. So for this first scene, the scene with the CO and the scene with the training, that might be a 1 full day of shooting. So that's 1 day, 2 locations. I'd probably go on base to film that. Then the next scene of him driving to the gas station would be another full day, and I'd have to go find a gas station to film at, which wouldn't be too hard. There are probably some smaller ones in a more rural town that I can use, get permission, and that way they don't come out and like, what are you doing with this camera? And then finally, that final scene will be in a briefing room, and that'll be a 3rd day. So it's 3 days, 3 full days of filming outside of our main story. Okay, cool. See, talking this stuff out sometimes really helps me as a director kind of like think of how I'm going to be placing things. He leaves the office and drives to a gas station. Station. With a big smile on his face. He's happy. He's ecstatic. This is every infantry marine's dream, is to be chosen, to be told that they're the best of the best and then chosen for spec ops. Like, oh, another great movie that like I'm pulling inspiration from is Jarhead. Jarhead is, from someone who's in the Marine Corps, Jarhead is very accurate to how the Marine Corps kind of operates. There's like a lot of sitting around and waiting, a lot of bullshitting and all that jazz. and especially that beginning opening scene where he's being selected, like that just shows that like he doesn't need combat experience. He just needs to show that he's really good. He doesn't even need to be stellar. That dude was skipping out on PT. He was in the bathroom, but he was so good at shooting that they were like, we need him. Okay. Drives to the gas station with a big smile on his face, but he's blindsided by what was his name? Matt. Comes out of nowhere and tries to fight him. I have this one. I feel like I'm gonna end up not using this hero goal sequence right here because I don't want to fill anything just to fill it. I'm going to make this bold. I'm going to center it. Because that's that stunning surprise, the end of Act 1. So let me just write this the way that I feel would be the most natural way. And if it's missing a beat, that's okay for now. And I can definitely go back and really think about what needs to be done. Once I get into like the middle and the ends, it might motivate some of the setup. Chuck tries to de-escalate the fight. He tries talking to Matt. He shows his true colors, his kind morality, and his restraint because of what just happened. So he was just selected for this program. He's not going to go get into a fight with somebody right afterwards because that's going to mess up his chances of actually being in there. So, but maybe Matt doesn't listen and tries and actually engages in fighting Chuck, which is funny because Chuck is one of the best and strongest people there. Chuck defends himself. Okay, cool. I ended up using it. And even though these are really short and small beats, they still contribute to that 6 hero goal sequences that lead directly into this stunning surprise. So Chuck's training on an obstacle course in his camis. He's shooting his rifle. He takes care of his gear. He's stoic. This is like the title sequence. But at the end of this title sequence montage, he's tormented by another Marine, Matt, while training. This bully has words for Chuck, with Chuck, insulting, belittling, etc. Chuck becomes defensive, stepping up, ready to fight this guy. But right before he can engage in a fight, his CO calls him into his office sternly. Therefore, Chuck has that restraint. He has that self-discipline where he says, okay, I'm going to leave the situation. I'm going to go into the CO's office, but he thinks he's going to get in trouble. But when he sits down, the CO is joined by a recruiter for a private sector platoon or private military program, and he's told that he's been selected to be attached to and recruited into this program. Therefore, Chuck's demeanor changes. He accepts the selection. The recruiter tells him that his training tells him that his training will commence immediately, which is key. He says that he'll be contacted by the instructor when ready. And Chuck leaves the office and drives to the gas station with a big smile on his face. When he gets there, he's blindsided by Matt, who comes out of nowhere and tries to fight him. So like he's not expecting it. Therefore, Chuck tries to de-escalate the fight. He tries talking to Matt. He shows his true colors, his kindness, his morality, and his restraint because of just what just happened. So, like I just said, he's not going to. He's thinking twice now. He's like, okay, it's not going to be a good look for me if I fight this guy. But Matt doesn't listen, and he engages in fighting Chuck because he's a hot-headed Marine and he's jealous. Therefore, Chuck defends himself, but while they're fighting, that's when Chuck is taken. And I'm going to add, and Matt are Chuck and Matt are taken into a van with a sack over their heads. Okay. Now we have like this cool moment where we cut to black. We just hear things. Okay. Act 2. Rolling right into it. We can only hear what's happening as Chuck is taken somewhere undisclosed. We're going to have finally the sack is taken off and we see the abandoned warehouse that he is in. He is alone. Okay, so at first he's alone, so we don't see this other guy, Matt. We don't know that he is there with him. Okay. These therefores and buts really make me think because once I started thinking of like, what's the next beat? I thought of like, the next thing that happens, he's going to scream. He's going to try to get out of there. He's alone. But how does that fall into the buts? Maybe that'll still be under the therefore. Because I don't want these to be too short. Like they have to be pretty much like scenes. Each hero goal sequence is like a scene. So it can't just be like, he does this, therefore this happens. It can't just be like 1 second because then the film will be over in like a couple minutes. Got to make this last for a whole hour and a half. Okay, he's alone. He screams. All right, working this out in my head. Here we go. No one comes. But eventually, a man dressed in Arabic clothing. Uh, what is he doing? Storms into the room. He begins to torture Chuck without questioning him. Just torture. I'm trying to think of like the kind of torture, maybe waterboarding. Because I also want to escalate the pain index. And I also am like a very big on like not showing a lot of gore. I don't want to show a crap ton of gore and like I'd rather be suspenseful and like waterboarding is one thing, like that's going to be really uncomfortable to watch, but like once we get into the torture that is going to be more intense, I don't think that I am wanting to write in a bunch of blood and guts and all that stuff just because it's going to be a micro budget film. So I don't really have the budget to make stuff like that look super realistic anyway. And just like the Steven Spielberg approach when it comes to Jaws, like he wanted the shark in there for the entire film, but it just didn't work. It was going to look amateur. It was going to look bad. So they ended up taking it out. And the film was better because of it, in my opinion, and probably many others' opinions. So I think I'm going to go with the same type of like concept of not showing the blood, not showing the gore, but implying it, showing the reaction on the actors' faces. I think that's more powerful. Let's see. All right, I'm just looking at the chat real fast. What's up, AJ? Thanks for joining us, man. AJ and I wrote the other day, and we're going to be coming out with another Cryptid Verse episode soon, so I'm excited to show all of you that. But in the meantime, we're working on this. All right, let's go back to my outline. Eventually, a man dressed up in Arabic clothing storms into the room. He begins to torture Chuck without questioning him. Just torture. Therefore, Chuck tries to figure out what this man wants. I'm going to call him Amir, right? Amir, there it is, yeah. Chuck tries to figure out what this man wants. He struggles. He asks Amir why he's doing this. Mir just leaves and doesn't say anything. Ooh, okay. Man, I'm imagining maybe Chuck finds a way to communicate with Matt, maybe through a pipe, because I'm imagining he's alone, and then we go into another room. Maybe Amir's actually torturing them both. He's playing the part real well. Amir leaves and doesn't say anything. We have Chuck sulks and tries to recover from the pain. And then he hears coughing through the wall, and hears coughing through the wall. He calls out to the person and finds out that it's Matt. They communicate about something, about why they're here, blah, blah, blah. And then let's show Matt's true colors, or not Matt's true colors, but Chuck's true colors again. Chuck tries to calm Matt. So rather than being selfish and just thinking about himself, he's actually like putting his own pain aside and trying to calm Matt down. That just shows that he is kind of like the better person. He's someone who's willing to sacrifice. It's going to be kind of a setup for maybe a payoff down the road. Because I mean, to me, that's one of the best things is when there's payoffs, setups and payoffs in films. I try to just inject as many of them as possible. So Chuck tries to calm Matt, but then Amir comes back. Does he come back to Chuck, or does he go to Matt and start torturing him? I think he comes back. Amir comes back to Chuck. This time he sits down and actually interrogates him. He reveals. Wait, no, he doesn't reveal anything to the American. No, he's in the mindset of being part of a terrorist cell group, and so I mean, he's playing a part, but still, if he's playing an accurate part, he has to stay true to that authentic character and maybe that's the reason why Chuck figures it out, because he slips up and he says something that is not in character, and Chuck's like, wait a second, what? You're American? Hmm. Uh, Chuck tries to counter-interrogate. He's not giving any information up, but also trying to get information from Amir. He does end up. Ooh, okay. Therefore, Amir says something that is helpful to Chuck, and then therefore Amir gets fed up and starts torturing him again. But Chuck really tries to have a good demeanor on, even though he is being tortured. Maybe it's not the ooh. tortures. Maybe I'm gonna add more over here on this side because I don't want my line to keep going. Nobody's gonna be able to see what I'm writing. So I don't know if you guys have seen, I forgot which 007 it is, but one of the 007 movies, one of the newer ones, I think it's the first reboot one, he's being tortured and he straight up starts like laughing and like going along with it and playing a part. I don't want it to be that blatantly obvious, but I think that that could be really funny, just like having something like that in there, where he's like, okay, let me go back to my training. Let me not give any information up. So because of that, Amir switches tactics, putting away the water and ooh, maybe that's the butt. Well, once again, I don't want to. This is all still the same scene. I don't want to rush into the reveal, even though technically it should be right at the midpoint. I feel like I'm not at the midpoint yet with my beats, so maybe I'm spreading them out a little bit too much. Let's just keep trying. Putting away the water and using another torture method, more intense. Oh my goodness. I'm going to turn that green so it matches. There we go. So a more intense torture method. And Chuck actually screams in pain this time. So now Chuck is actually in a lot of pain. Like he was able to withstand the waterboarding, but once we move to a darker method of torture, he actually screams out. And I'm gonna stay in this cell still. And I'm gonna have him say, let's say we hear Matt through the wall calling out to Chuck. Amir stops, realizing they know about each other, and leaves the room to torture Matt instead. All right. So that's like a whole scene right there. Maybe I'm going to switch that there. I'm getting real close to that midpoint, though. I don't know if we're there yet. Okay, Amir says something that's helpful to Chuck. Amir gets fed up and starts torturing him again. Chuck is really tries to have a good demeanor, even though he's being tortured. But Amir switches tactics, putting away the waterboarding and using another torture method instead, more intense. Chuck actually screams in pain this time. We hear Matt through the wall calling out to Chuck. Amir stops, realizing they know about each other, and leaves the room to torture Matt instead. So Chuck has no choice but to just sit and listen while Matt is being tortured. He tries to get out of his bindings. And at this point, maybe we show a close-up of a weakness in the bindings. And that's going to be a setup for later. And then he has no choice but to sit down and listen while Matt's being tortured. He tries to get out of his bindings. We show a close-up of a weakness of his bindings. That's going to be a good setup. But then after trying, he finally gives up and just sulks, essentially blaming himself for Matt being in this situation. I'm writing like the whole part about him blaming himself as kind of like some character development for myself. That's not going to stay like in the script. That's just kind of like for me to refer back to when I am actually going in and writing the script and writing like what he's doing. The things that we see are going to reflect his feeling. But once again, I'm not going to be writing any feelings or emotions or inner thoughts into the screenplay. Now I'm thinking, I have Amir killing the innocent person. That is, so Amir kills Matt. That's the innocent person. I have that kind of down here at the end as the stunning surprise because that would be the stunning surprise, especially after you know that he's an American soldier. I don't know why I keep thinking that it should happen before the reveal. Maybe the midpoint is Amir killing Matt, and the stunning surprise is that Amir is an American soldier. Now I'm going to have to think. If Amir kills him, or if Amir reveals that he's an American soldier at the midpoint, then we're going to have to fill this whole second half with still interactions with Matt. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe Matt, knowing that this is all part of the initiation, feels a little bit more comfortable, and like maybe that could add some more tension and suspense leading up to the killing. Um, mm. No, you know what? I'm really, really feeling like the pacing would be better if the death is now and the reveal is at the end. Because then this first half of Act Two is all about Chuck trying to save Matt. And then the second half is going to be all about Chuck coming to terms with that he failed, um, coming to terms with the fact that like his new goal is now to just survive and escape, I guess. I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Hmm. So he blames himself for the situation. When the sounds stop, Chuck tries to comfort Matt again. Telling him he's going to get them both out of here. But while Chuck is speaking, Amir comes back, takes Matt, and brings him into the room with Chuck. He begins yelling commands at Chuck, telling him to give up the information, threatening to kill Matt. Now, that scene, I feel like I'm picturing something similar to like Mission Impossible 3 with where Philip Seymour Hoffman is torturing the girl and Tom Cruise is trying to like talk him down, and then he ends up killing her anyway because Amir is going to end up killing Matt. I'm going to center this because that's once again that's my midpoint right there. Oops. Okay, therefore Chuck gets really calm, telling Amir what he wants to know, but secretly he's lying. He's trying to play the part and de-escalate. Once again, like that scene from Mission Impossible. But even after all his efforts, Amir kills Matt. That's the point of no return. The stakes are raised, the reversal. Okay, I think this is going to flow a little bit better. So we've got... What's he going to do afterwards? Chuck's reaction is intense. He mourns and screams, weeps. Amir just stands there unmoved, unemotional. Now this is going to really... Hey, what's going on? Uh-oh. Something just happened. So this is going to really get into Amir's psyche, his headspace, because he doesn't change once it's revealed that he is actually an American soldier. It's, to me, that's like doubles down, right? So, for example, I hated my drill instructors when I was in boot camp. They sucked. But they were also like, at the end of the day, they were teaching us. They sucked for a reason. They were doing it for a reason. And we saw their humanity come out. We saw them laugh at certain things. We saw they ate, they slept in their room while we were all in the big barracks. And then after we were done and we graduated, they were still very intense people. Like that's their personality. That's what they've been trained to be. But they shook our hand, they smiled, they showed their humanity. And even like years later, I met one of them out in town and he was a normal person. He was a normal human with a wife and kids. And, he, once again, he was able to take on the persona, but then like, it wasn't so intense. He wasn't like killing people. And so he was able to keep his humanity. But this character, in order to do what you do, in order to be able to take like an innocent civilian life just as a training exercise and not feel emotional, like you've got to be kind of a psychopath or a sociopath to be able to do that. And so I think that's showing that before it's even revealed. And then just like, I kind of want to put some demonic imagery in there. Like maybe he walks it, like a camera angle, Amir walks up and like, it looks like he has horns or something like that. Or like he looks demonic, just to kind of like highlight his evil. But right here. So I think that him just standing there after he kills Matt, unmoved, and then he leaves, unemotional. And then he leaves. Chuck alone again. All right, and so now this is where writer's block comes into play. Do I have anything on my notes about the midpoints? Ooh, I put baby crying. If you guys have ever seen Reservoir Dogs, I think that the scene with the ear that Quentin Tarantino directed, is pretty fantastic. I want to take that route with a lot of this torture, like not necessarily showing it, but showing the reaction. Okay, baby crying. That's a good note. That was my last note too. So from here on out, I don't have any idea other than that ending. Gonna have to fill. I think the second part of Act Two sometimes is the hardest. I know that a lot of screenwriters say Act Two is the hardest to write. Like it's easy to start a story, it's easy to find an ending, a satisfying ending. It's hard to fill in all of that space in between with stuff that's meaningful and actually pushes the character forward. Okay. Sounds of a baby crying is played over a loud speaker. Now, at this point, I almost think that we should have some type of montage to help pass the time, like a slower montage of just like torture. So we see a montage of time passing, and Chuck is just numb at this point. He continues glancing over at Matt's body, blaming himself for his death. Cool. And then, but at some point, suddenly the crying stops and Amir comes back in. He sits down and calmly tries to have a conversation with Chuck. He takes off his head covering, showing his face for the first time. So because of that, therefore, Chuck, in his weakened state, I'm going to put days pass. Chuck, in his weakened state, is actually comforted by a normal conversation. This is probably part of the tactic too, like break them down and then have that normal conversation where you actually are treated like a human again, and like psychologically you probably would open up and be more willing to like give personal information. So I'm sure that that's part of his tactic. He drops his guard and actually engages with Amir. I'm going to put an asterisk over here. If I can find it. This conversation will reveal more about Amir's character and also show the difference in world views between the two. But when Chuck finally realizes that he is giving away precious info, he puts his guard back up. He spits in Amir's face and goes silent again, accepting his fate to be tortured once more. Therefore, Amir goes back to torturing him. Then leaves. But we see when Chuck is alone again, a close-up of his bindings. He is realizing that with some work he can get out of them. This scene right here of this conversation is probably going to have to be a pretty slow scene. I'm going to have to probably work a lot on that dialogue. It's going to be tough. Okay. I think that he's going to probably get out of his bindings here. Okay, but is that going to be a but, or is that going to be for there? Is that going to be a therefore? Chuck finally breaks the bindings and lunges for Amir. It might be here. It might be here. It might be here. It might be here. I don't know. We're almost done. We've got a lot that we've done in just the past, what, 2 hours? Yeah, 2 hours. Once I get a really good idea of these beats and kind of dial them in a little bit, like obviously I'm gonna really try. I've got about another 45 minutes of time before I have to get off and go do some other work. But hopefully by the time I'm done here, I'll have all of the beats fleshed out. It'll all make sense to like a cohesive story. And probably tonight and tomorrow, I might just read it over and over again and like dial it in a little bit and make sure that it all makes sense. Make sure that's like my choices for location and props and settings and stuff are doable on the on micro budget. And technically, a micro budget is $100,000 or less. I'm aiming to do this for between $10,000 and $30,000, depending on if I can get some really good actors involved. I might need more of a $30,000 range. But if I just use all first time actors or non actors, I could probably get away with 10,000 if I could find the locations and coordinate with everybody and get people to come on and help in any way possible. I think I could probably get it done for 10,000. But that's kind of my plan after we're done here. Make sure that it all makes sense cohesively. And then the next time I jump on live, I'm going to jump right into the screenplay. And which obviously is going to take more than just one session to flesh out the screenplay and get it up to par. But that first version of the screenplay is going to be just kind of like a vomit version, and then I will dial that into a second draft and hopefully get it into a polished draft and a shooting draft by draft 3 or 4, and then send it out for some notes. And at that point, I'm going to go right into shot listing and storyboarding, which I'm going to bring you all along the ride for that as well. But my goal is to start shooting this within maybe the next 6 months. So the fact that we're moving pretty quickly in the outline is good, because to me, I'm bringing in a lot of my own personal experience. I'm bringing in a lot of inspiration from other films and other filmmakers. Being the writer and the director, I'm already and the editor, I'm already thinking about the pacing and the imagery and the kinds of shots that I want to use. Being able to work with someone who's really fast paced and really talented, like Daniel Tomzak, that's going to help on set keep things moving, so we're not dragging things on and taking hour and a half or 2 hours to just set up a shot, because that's sometimes is what happens when you're using super big bulky cinema cameras. So I'm just trying to be as economical as possible, and I'm trying to move quickly because once again, if I'm just sitting on ideas and not acting and not putting them out into the universe, nothing's ever going to happen. They're just going to sit on my hard drive. So I might as well move quick, get it done as good as I possibly can, and then move on to the next idea, because I've got too many ideas in my head and I don't have enough time to execute all of them. So here we go. Let's try to figure this last bit out right here. Thank you, AJ. AJ said that I love the idea of the horns or something demonic and symbolism. You could subtly do some stuff, some start stuff, some smart stuff. Efficiency is the only solution. Thank you, AJ. Appreciate your input. I am every once in a while I'm checking the chat. So if anybody's watching and has an idea that could potentially that I could have overlooked, I always love inspiration and collaboration, and so I'm welcome to it. I might not use all the ideas, but I'm going to try to check every now and then and see if one of you can help me out. That's another reason why I love like writing with people, is because sometimes I see things in a certain way and someone else just says one thing that makes my whole head spin, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, all that demonic imagery that will definitely come into play when I'm writing the screenplay, and but I am going to make a note about it. Okay, I'm going to say, here we go, some asterisks. Use demonic imagery with Amir. And this twist of Amir being American, like, it's not just another military terrorist film. It's, to me, it makes it a lot darker, because in our culture, like when you hear an American killing another American, it just hits deeper. It's like, you know what I mean? I don't know, just a feeling. And it'll go against, a lot of stereotypes of people in that region, people in these terrorist organizations. They're ruthless. They're willing to do whatever it takes for their cause. And the fact that Americans are acting in the same exact way really kind of like puts things in perspective for us. So hmm. So he's realizing he can get out of the bindings, but he's not going to get out until after it's revealed, because that's going to be the climax. He gets out, and he maybe during this time we really continue to cut back and forth as the tension builds of him like trying to rub or like pull the bindings apart. I still like, I'm trying to think about like what the bindings are going to look like. Are they going to be chains? How tied up is he going to be? I really want it to look realistic. Maybe zip ties or duct tape. Hmm. The way I'm thinking about it, this last part might just not be too long. All right, I'm gonna write down what I have going on in my head and see if it's too short or too fast paced. Chuck begins working, breaking secretly. He begins breaking his bindings secretly while calling out to Amir. He is being I don't want him to be vulgar. At some point, actually, now I'm starting to think that, like, at some point we have to reveal kind of his moral shift. That has to be in this act two, or just before the stunning surprise. Act two, he's at his lowest point. This is the darkest hour. Just as they are about to succeed, they fail and must overcome their adversity. Adversary. Hmm. So, yeah, these are good notes for me. They keep me on track. So he's about to succeed right here. How is he going to verbally get his way out of this? Maybe he breaks his bindings here and he lunges and they fight, and then Amir, his accent goes away and he's like, wait. And then they could have a whole conversation about morality, almost like at the end of the new Superman movie, there's this monologue of Superman where he talks about being human and doing the right thing. But I don't want to be preachy. All right. Live screenwriting. OMG. He strangles Amir, then decides not to kill him and instead just detain him. And I'm going to put a note that this is the hardest decision for Matt? No, for Chuck to make because he is so emotional about Matt. That's, oh man, that's the hardest thing about morality is that you feel a certain way. You feel a certain way and you want to react with your emotions, but to do the moral thing is sometimes to not react to your emotions. It's to do what's right and not do what you feel. Actually, probably all the time. If you just follow what you feel and do whatever you feel, you're usually not being moral because humans are flawed, sinful creatures. Nice. Thank you, AJ. He's saying zip ties and zip cuffs. Uh, and that maybe Matt and Chuck start working on their bindings together. That's good. That'll cause some bonding up in the beginning before Matt dies. I'll put that right here. They start talking about how to break their bindings and both start working on them together. Okay. Nice. That's a good little detail. Thanks, AJ. Okay. He's being loud and vulgar. We're going to show him being vulgar. I'm just going to write that down for now. I think I am going to try to figure out how to um, show kind of his moral change in Act 2, the second act of Act 2. But for now, because that'll come back to this part right here. When he decides not to kill him, it's going to be a callback to his decision to like not want to do this anymore. Like he has training. He's been training for like 5 years to kill people. And so instinctually he's going to like want to kill people, especially bad people, but he makes that decision not to. So we got to show that change. Chuck Bean's breaking his bindings secretly while calling out to Amir. He's being loud and vulgar, trying to stir up Amir's emotions. So that he can make him feel vulnerable and take the advantage. So he's trying to get Amir worked up. So maybe he's going to say some like pretty gnarly stuff. But when Amir finally comes back, he seems unfazed. He threatens that if he doesn't get what he wants from Chuck, that he is going to just kill him. He hints to the fact that time is running out, secretly referring to the training that he is conducting. He goes one step farther in his torture methods. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research probably to the different types of methods of torture and see kind of like what we can pull off on such a low budget that's also brutal. Torture methods, making it unbearable for Chuck. Therefore, Chuck finally, maybe that's not a therefore, but I think it's going to work. It'll be okay. Therefore, Chuck finally breaks his bindings and lunges for Amir. He strangles Amir, then decides not to kill him and instead detain him. But Amir changes. His accent goes away. It is revealed that he's actually an American soldier. Therefore, Chuck releases him. They have a conversation about what's happening. Maybe he doesn't realize it. Maybe Chuck thinks he's lying. That'll probably come into the details of the script. Chuck releases him. They have a conversation about what's happening. Amir tells him all about his American life. Tells him that the training isn't over yet. That's going to be in the but. But he tells Chuck that the training isn't over yet and that actually, but Chuck is so angry that Matt was killed by an American that he cannot control his impulses. He kills oops, sorry. He kills Amir. Takes Matt's body and leaves the compound. He follows corridors until he finds the exit, but he comes out into a military briefing room where he is oofa. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we need something at the very, very end. I think that the end is going to be this therefore, because there's not going to be another but at the very end, because then that would lead into another therefore. That makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you guys. Comes out of the military briefing room where he is getting a standing ovation. All the private military soldiers are there telling him that he passed and that he is the most badass one there because he killed Amir. They aren't even mad about that. And even Chuck's CO is there congratulating him. I'm going to make this bold because that is the final therefore. Therefore, Chuck's eyes glaze over. He stares off into the distance as being praised, standing ovation. And I'll just add a note that, like, he does not want this life anymore. Just as a note from me, maybe I'll add that in also here. I don't want him to tell him anything. Show, don't tell, Peter. Come on now. Show, don't tell. I got to remind myself that sometimes. I'm going to add another note here that says, I'm going to make it all capitals. We have to figure out the subtle reveals that Chuck is changing into a more moral man, that he does not want to be a killer or a Marine anymore. The realization characters change. Okay, that is just a note for myself. Can I just do this? There we go. All right. Holy crap. We did it. I'm going to read it through one more time. But before I do, I want to thank you for joining me today. And I'll ask that if you're interested in screenwriting, storytelling, character structure, directing, and original indie films, please like and subscribe. It's going to help me out. It's going to help this business grow. It's going to allow me to bring on more people and support their projects. And if you would like, go ahead and check out faneronfilms.com because that is going to be our platform for streaming. Eventually, it'll become a member site, but we just want to bring fans along the ride with us. We want to teach the creative process. We want to get you all involved in coming up with our stories, and then we want to make just good original films to kind of fill that void that those big studios are leaving in our lives right now. So once again, like and subscribe if you're enjoying yourself. So finally, I'm going to read what I came up with for my outline. And if it all makes sense to me, then next time I jump on, I'm going to jump right into writing the screenplay. So here we go. In the beginning, we see a montage of Chuck. He's training on an obstacle course in camis. He's shooting his rifle. He takes care of his gear. He is stoic. This shows his personality. But before he's done with his training, he's tormented by another Marine, Matt, while training. This bully has words with Chuck, insulting, belittling, etc. Still don't know why, but I think this is a good interaction. Therefore, Chuck becomes defensive, stepping up, ready to fight this guy, defending his honor. But his CO calls him into the office sternly. Therefore, Chuck leaves the situation, having that discipline, entering the CO's office. He thinks he's going to be getting in trouble, so he is kind of more on his game at this point. He wants to be a stellar Marine, but he's not getting in trouble. The CO is joined by a recruiter for a private sector platoon or private military. He's told that he's been selected for recruitment. Therefore, Chuck happily accepts this selection. The recruiter tells him that his training will commence immediately. He says that he'll be contacted by the instructor when ready. Chuck leaves the office, drives to the gas station with a big smile on his face, but while he's there, he's blindsided by Matt, who comes out of nowhere and tries to fight him. Therefore, obviously, especially after getting the selection, Chuck tries to de-escalate the fight. He tries talking to Matt. He shows his true colors, his kind morality, and his restraints because of what just happened. But Matt doesn't listen, and he engages in fighting Chuck, which, unfortunately, that happens way too often in the Marine Corps. Therefore, Chuck, even though he doesn't want to be involved in this, he defends himself. Maybe he doesn't take blows. Maybe he just kind of puts up his guard, but he defends himself. And in that chaos, both him and Matt are taken into a van with sacks over their heads. That's our stunning surprise. That brings us into Act 2, where afterwards, we can only hear what's happening as Chuck's taken somewhere undisclosed. Finally, the sack is taken off, and we see the abandoned warehouse that he's in. He's alone. He screams. No one comes. Eventually, a man dressed in Arabic clothing, Amir, storms into the room. He begins to torture Chuck without questioning him. Just torture. Chuck tries to figure out what this man wants. He struggles. He asks Amir why he's doing this, but Amir just leaves and doesn't say anything. Chuck sulks and tries to recover from the pain. He hears coughing through the wall. Therefore, he calls out to the other person and finds out that it's Matt. They communicate. Chuck tries to calm Matt. They start talking about how to break their bindings and both start working on them together. Amir comes back to Chuck. So while they're talking, we get this interruption, but Amir comes back to Chuck. This time he sits down and actually interrogates him like a real bad cop interrogation. Chuck tries to counter-interrogate, not giving up any information, but also trying to get information from Amir. Amir says something that can be helpful to Chuck, but then, therefore, he gets fed up and starts torturing him again. Chuck really tries to have a good demeanor, even though he's being tortured. Kind of like, not exactly, but kind of like that scene from, what's it called? 007. But because Chuck is having a good demeanor, Amir switches tactics, putting away the waterboarding, using another torture method, more intense this time. Don't know what yet. Chuck is actually screaming in pain this time. We hear Matt through the wall calling out to Chuck, and Amir stops, realizing that they know about each other, and leaves the room to torture Matt instead. Therefore, Chuck has no choice but to just sit and listen while Matt is being tortured. He tries to get out of his bindings again. We show a close-up of the weakness in his bindings, and that's going to be the setup. After trying, he finally gives up and just sulks, blaming himself for Matt being in this situation. When the sound stops, Chuck tries to comfort Matt again, telling him he's going to get them both out of here. But while Chuck is speaking, Amir comes back, takes Matt, brings him into the room with Chuck, and he yells. He begins yelling commands at Chuck, telling him to give up the information, threatening to kill Matt. Therefore, Chuck gets really calm, just like the scene from Mission Impossible 3, and starts telling Amir what he wants to know, what he wants to hear, not what he wants to know. He's lying, but he's doing it in a way that's very agreeable. But secretly, he's lying. He's trying to play the part and de-escalate. But it does not trick Amir. Even after all this, Amir kills Matt. Oh, therefore, Chuck's reaction is so intense. He mourns, he screams, he weeps. Amir just stands there unemotional. Then Amir leaves Chuck alone. But while mourning, the sounds of a baby begins crying. It's being played over the loudspeaker. So now the torture commences. It's become really intense. It's becoming more intense. He also doesn't have another person to console in. Therefore, because of this pain, this dark moment, we see the montage of time passing, days pass, as Chuck is just numb at this point. He continues glancing over at Matt's body, blaming himself for his death. But suddenly the crying stops and Amir comes back in. He sits down and calmly tries to have a conversation with Chuck. He takes off his head covering, showing his face for the first time. Therefore, Chuck, in his weakened state, is comforted by a normal conversation. He drops his guard and actually engages with Amir. And my note is the conversation will reveal more about Amir's character and show the difference in world views between the two. But when Chuck finally realizes that he's giving away precious info, he puts his guard back up. He spits in Amir's face and goes silent again, accepting his fate to be tortured once more. Therefore, Amir goes back to torturing him, then leaves. But we see when Chuck is alone again, a close-up of his bindings. He's realizing with some work he can get out of them. Therefore, Chuck begins breaking his bindings secretly while calling out to Amir. He's got a plan. He's being loud and vulgar, trying to stir up Amir's emotions so that he can make him feel vulnerable and take advantage. But when Amir finally comes back in, he seems unfazed. He threatens that if he doesn't get what he wants from Chuck, that he's going to just kill him. He hints to the fact that time is running out, secretly referring to the training that he's conducting. So pretty much like if Chuck just made it through the next day, he would have basically just been released and been told like, you did it, congratulations. But he's not that kind of guy. Chuck finally, oh, Amir goes one step further in his torture methods. I'm going to put Amir. Amir goes one step further in his torture methods, making it unbearable for Chuck. Chuck finally breaks the bindings and lunges for Amir. He strangles Amir, then decides not to kill him and instead detain him. So that's the hardest decision for Chuck to make because he's so emotional about Matt. So this is like the big moment where he becomes the hero and he doesn't kill. He doesn't do the thing that he instinctually wants to do. But Amir changes his accent and he reveals that he's actually an American soldier and this was all a test. And I'm going to have to really think about this scene, this last scene, because maybe like instinctually I would say that in a situation like this, if you do find out the truth, that the training just ends right there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to be subtle about what Amir reveals because he still is this demonic person. So therefore, Chuck releases him. They have a conversation about what's happening. Once again, I have to think about the subtlety of that. Amir tells him about his American life. Subtlety. But Chuck is so angry that Matt was killed by an American that he cannot control his impulses. Therefore, he kills Amir. It's going to be longer than just saying he kills Amir. It's going to be a really pretty intense scene. That's the climax right here. Climax. He kills Amir, takes Mac's body, and leaves the compound. He follows corridors until he finds the exit. But he comes out into a military briefing room. That's like that last surprise. Like, what? Comes out into a military briefing room where he's getting a standing ovation. All the private military soldiers are there telling him that he passed and that he's the most badass one because he killed Amar. They aren't even mad about that. Even Chuck's CO is there congratulating him. So it's not just it's not just that these people are crazy. It's even his CO is there. Therefore, Chuck does not react. He does not celebrate. He does not. He's changed. He's a tortured man. So his eyes glaze over. He stares off into the distance as he's being praised. Standing ovation. He does not want this life anymore. So we're going to show that on his face, and then we're going to cut to black. And that, to me, that like not knowing, I like that. Some people might not, but yeah. Okay. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think it makes sense. I'm quite excited about the idea, especially since I am former military and I have a lot of friends who are former military, and I could potentially get some connections to make this thing happen. Um, I think it's also like because I lived in this world, it's pretty authentic idea, but it also explores kind of like brutality of humanity. It explores, you know, are your choices and your lifestyle reflecting your morality? Um, it explores human compassion and empathy. So I think that the story itself has a lot of promise. So, like I said, thanks for joining me. I think that this was awesome. And my next step is going to be just fleshing this out a little bit more. And next time I jump on, you guys will be joining me for my the writing session. We're going to jump right into the screenplay. So thanks again. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Check out fanaronfilms.com, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.